Thanks for the warm welcome. I'd like to start with a couple of challenges today's organizations are facing. In today's DevOps era, there is increasing pressure to speed up time to market. To meet this demand, organizations are relying on increasing number of tech stacks, deployment models, and open source software without clear security requirements. It would be an understatement to say that modern software is growing in complexity. As a result, 75% of vulnerabilities are application related. Yet, there is no prescriptive and measurable way to analyze and improve software assurance posture for an organization. Now, in order to resolve these challenges, we have recently released OWASP 2.0 in February of 2020. My name is Hardik Parekh, and I'm here to share my knowledge about how to navigate DevOps security journey at scale with OWASP Software Assurance Maturity Model version 2.0. Before we start the talk, I wanted to share a little bit about myself. I started my career as a software engineer. I got an opportunity to lead various security teams and programs at mid-size and large corporations like Dell, EMC RSA, Intuit, Amazon, and Splunk. I'm also on advisory boards for a few security and data privacy startups and nonprofit trade organization CompTIA, which issues IT security certifications such as Security Plus, CISA Plus, Pentest Plus, CAS Plus, etc. Now, throughout my career, I contributed to industry through various safe code publications, SANS Top 25 Programming Errors, CVSS version 3.0, BSIM since version 1, OWASP SAM, and most recently NIST SSDF framework. For those of you who might not be familiar with the BSIM, BSIM is another software security maturity model, which is descriptive in nature. It was developed by Cigital by interviewing 6 independent software vendor companies from SafeCode founding member companies when I was at EMC. It's more of a descriptive model of what activities other security organizations are performing at each maturity level, versus OWASP SAM is more of a prescriptive model which provides prescriptive guidance on which activities each organization should be performing at each maturity level. Thus, OWASP SAM is more of a prescriptive model versus BSIM is more of a descriptive model. I started contributing to OWASP SAM back in 2016 and have been one of the co-authors and one of the core members of OWASP SAM project ever since then. Now, before we start this talk, I would like to get some legal stuff out of the way. I'm not speaking on behalf of my current or previous employers, nor am I here as a representative of my current or previous employers. My opinions are solely my own, and they do not reflect those of my current or previous employers. Let's look at a quick agenda. I assume many of you might not be familiar with OWASP SAM. Don't worry, that's completely okay. This is why I'm going to spend some time introducing OWASP SAM, covering what is SAM, why do we need a model like SAM, core principle of SAM, and the project history. After that, I will go over the changes we introduced in SAM 2.0 or 1.5. And last, we will discuss how to apply SAM in your organization to navigate DevOps security journey at scale. Now, if you are playing one of these 15 plus roles, you will be able to take valuable information from this talk and apply to your organization, literally starting from tomorrow. Now, let's look at what is SAM. OWASP SAM is one of the flagship OWASP projects, and the flagship status is given to projects with strategic importance to both OWASP and AppSec in general. And there are about 15 or 16 flagship projects out of a couple of hundred OWASP projects. OWASP SAM is a framework for software assurance that provides effective and measurable way for all types of organizations to analyze and improve their software security posture that is tailored to the specific risk that particular organization might be facing. SAM is full of useful resources that will help with evaluating an organization's current security practices, providing recommendations or suggestions for growing and maturing those practices, and providing a way to demonstrate concrete improvements over a period of time, and defining and measuring security activities throughout the life cycle. One of the benefits of OWASP SAM is that it is a completely vendor agnostic. SAM can be done in-house, or you can have one of the several AppSec consulting firms help you with the assessment and creating plans and roadmaps, maturing your security journey. Now let's look at why do we need a model like SAM. As I mentioned earlier, in quest to increase speed, today's organization is growing in complexity without clear security requirements. As a result, almost 75% of vulnerabilities are application related. If you look at the latest security breaches like Equifax and Capital One, they are also more application related. To standardize security activities in such a complex software environment, we need a model like OWASP SAM. I really like this quote from George Box, who has been called one of the great statistical minds of 20th century. The most that can be expected from any model is that it can supply a useful approximation to reality. All models are wrong and some models are useful. I repeat, all models are wrong and some models are useful. The point is that you cannot find a model that is going to exactly describe the reality. And there are too many variables in real life. But you can have a model that is close enough to be useful, and that is what SAM is aspiring to become. The SAM was defined with flexibility and versatility in mind, such that it can be utilized by small startups, mid-sized organizations, and large organizations using any style of development. Additionally, this model can be applied organization-wide for a single line of business or even an individual project. SAM is both measurable and actionable. It defines maturity level across business functions and provides clear-cut pathways for improving their maturity levels, thus providing step-by-step navigation plan to achieve higher levels of maturity for an organization. Now let's look at SAM history, project history. The first version of SAM was originally created through OpenSAM project led by Praveer Chandra, who was an independent software security consultant. After a number of years, around 2015, a small group got together at OWASP and worked together to breathe some life into this SAM as an OWASP project. Hence the birth of SAM version 1.1, which became the first OWASP SAM project. OWASP SAM 1.1, it really expanded and restructured its predecessor into 4 complementary resources: the core document, the how-to guide, quick start guide, and the toolbox, which is a spreadsheet that provides simple automation for data collection, metrics, graphs, and which helps you create like a step-by-step navigation journey for your organization's security maturity journey. Back in 2017, we released version 1.5 of SAM, which incorporates refinement of the scoring model to provide more granularity to scoring in the assessment. And now we recently launched SAM 2.0 in February, where we have changed the measurement model one more time to add qualitative measurement to represent how well an organization is performing a particular security practice. In addition, we made some fundamental changes. As a result, SAM 2.0 is not backward compatible. I repeat, SAM 2.0 is not backward compatible. SAM is built on few core principles. First, an organization's behavior changes slowly over time. Changes need to be smaller and iterative to really take hold and make a difference. As many of you may have led many of the organizational changes, it takes time to bring the change and stick it into your company's culture. The second principle is there is no single recipe that works for all organizations. SAM is built with that in mind and supports an organization building a program that is tailored to their specific risk profile their company's culture, and their existing level of maturity. Third principle is guidance related to security activities must be prescriptive in nature. Too often, security initiatives fail due to poor details, lack of communication, or invalid assumptions. Overall, the success of the program will be based on being simple, well defined, and measurable. Now, let's look at maturity levels and the assessment scores. SAM is defined in three levels of maturity: ad hoc provision, increased efficiency, and comprehensive mastery at scale, mainly through the automation. Unlike other maturity models and SAM 2.0 predecessors, there are four levels of assessment scores for each security activity, which makes a fine-grained improvements visible, such as no implementation, implementation across few or some projects, implementation across at least half of the projects, and implementation across many or most projects. Now, the key thing over here is we are not saying all projects, because again, we had a lot of debate internally when we were defining this different levels. And one of the key things that we realize is in real world, it's especially in the large organization, it's very difficult, almost next to impossible to accomplish any security practice across all projects. For example, there's always some project is being rewritten in new language or new technology, things like that. It does not make sense to input your valuable resources in the project, which is kind of going to be obsolete in a few quarters or few months. As a result, we said, like, we will give maturity level 1 to all the projects who has many or most projects have been implemented, and not all the projects. Now, also, not everyone needs to make level 3 in all different areas. Similar to the Six Sigma or CMMI, the goal is not to max out on each and every security practice. Honestly, that probably won't be even a good use of your limited resources. What the target maturity should be for your organization is largely up to you, depending on the business drivers and the risk your organization might be facing. In version 1.5, we have modified the scoring model to provide multiple choice answers to allow a more accurate assessment. Previously in SAM and most models, the questions were yes and no, which is kind of great from academic perspective. But as we know, in real world, the answer many times lies in between yes and no. For example, try to answer the following question for education guidance level at level 2 in SAM. The question is, are those involved in the development process given role-specific security training and guidance? You have trained some of the developers and would like to train some project managers and QA testers. But given the question, do you answer yes or no? The real dilemma is, if you answer no, you get no credit and looks like you're not working on it, but you are. And if you answer yes, you now get full credit, and you may have issued down the road asking for training budget for other roles because the dashboard says that you already did this, you already implemented this. With the new model, you can answer something like some or at least half and get the partial credit, but also have the ability to show improvements later down the road when you finish the initiative to train the other roles. Now, while defining the SAM 2.0, we collected a lot of feedback from some of the practitioners, and all of the volunteers also practice SAM 2.0. So based on all the feedback and input that we received from the SAM community, we have made some changes to the measurement model one more time. And one of the biggest complaints or the feedback that we received was the practices were focused just on the coverage and not on the quality. And we wanted to address that particular challenge. So in SAM 2.0, we are now assessing activities along two different axes: the coverage by means of questions and quality by means of mandatory criteria. Let's look at this high-level snapshot of SAM 1.5 so you understand what changes we have made in SAM 2.0. The SAM is defined in three different levels. At highest level, SAM 1.5 defined four critical business functions. Each business function had three security practices, and each security practice had three levels of maturity. Now, one would ask, what are the motivations behind a new version? Well, there are five motivations, which we'll visit in few minutes. So number one was to align with recent development methodologies such as Agile, DevOps, to make it development methodology agnostic. Version 1.5 and its predecessors look more suitable for waterfall development methodology, even though it was not meant to be. We realized that it's missing the key aspects of guidance in terms of how to securely build and deploy software, especially since CI/CD has become an integral part of Agile and DevOps methodologies. Now, second motivation is to improve the measurement. As we discussed, even though SAM 1.5 addressed the feedback about granularity level, it still didn't address the question how well a security activity is being performed, thus needing some qualitative measurement. The third motivation was to avoid an orphan or unrelated activities. And there are quite few security activities in SAM 1.5 and 1.1 that are defined such that it lacked consistent theme across different levels of maturity within a security practice, which also resulted in few orphan activities such as code signing. Now, the fourth motivation is to arrange the maturity levels in order of increasing difficulty. The other shortcoming of version 1.5 was that sometimes security activities at high level were easier to implement compared to the security activities at lower level, which really didn't make sense to us as well as many of these SAM practitioners. So that was also another motivation. And last but not least, we also wanted to improve the production process for SAM. SAM production process itself was very slow and waterfally, resulting in major overhaul, major work every time we needed to release a new version. As a result, we needed to come up with a new version of SAM, and SAM 2.0 came to light. This is SAM 2.0 framework at a very high level. And the areas highlighted are the changes from SAM 1.5, which we'll cover in a few more minutes. At the highest level, SAM 2.0 is defined in three different levels. SAM defines five critical business functions. Each business function is category of security activities related to the nuts and bolts of software development in your organization. For each business function, SAM defines three security practices, and each security practice is an area of security-related activities that build assurance for respective business function. For each security practice, SAM defines three maturity levels as objectives. Each level within a security practice is characterized by a successively more sophisticated objective and more stringent success metrics than the previous level. Overall, as you increase the level of maturity, you should expect higher cost of implementation. And now, if you look at the framework, you can see that governance is more focused on the program itself, looking at more strategic elements such as strategy and metrics, policy and compliance, education, guidance, etc. Now, we have renamed construction business function into design and introduced new business function implementation. Design, implementation, verification, and operations cover the core of a software development lifecycle. Design is focused on threat assessment and security requirements during earlier phases of software development lifecycle, while implementation is focused on secure build, secure deployment, and defect management aspects while you are building your software. While verification is more focused on testing, verifying aspects, and the operations is focused on incident detection and management, and environment management where the apps lives on. Now let's take a closer look at security practices. Each security practice is divided into two streams, Stream A and Stream B. The purpose of these streams is to align and link activities within practice or different maturity levels. Each stream has an objective to be reached, and this objective can be reached in increasing levels of maturity. This way, we ensure that there are no orphan activities that seem only relevant on a single maturity level. For instance, code signing in SAM 1.2 is at level 2, but there is no related activity at level 1 or level 3, thus making it look like it's an orphan activity. Let's take a closer look at one of the security practices, requirements-driven testing under a verification business function. The goal of the requirements-driven testing practice is to ensure that the implemented security controls operate as expected and satisfy project stated security requirements. Requirement-driven testing security practice is divided into two streams: control verification and misuse and abuse testing. The former verifies that the application's security controls satisfy stated security requirements and validates their correct functioning. These requirements are typically functional in nature. Negative testing addresses the quality of the implementation of security controls and aims to detect unexpected design flaws and implementation bugs through misuse and abuse testing. Now, these streams align and link activities in the practice over different maturity levels. Each stream has an objective to be reached, as we discussed earlier. It does so by incrementally building a set of security test cases and regression test cases and executing them regularly. In its most advanced forms, the practice promotes security stress testing such as denial of service and strives to continually improve application security by consistently automating security unit test cases and creating automated security regression test cases for all the bugs identified and fixed in previous releases. Now let's look at secure build. This practice focuses on creating a consistently repeatable secure build process and accounting for the security of application dependencies. The secure build practice emphasizes the importance of building software in a standardized, repeatable manner, and of so doing using secure components, including third-party software dependencies. As we discussed earlier, today's modern software has more than 50 to 60% of third-party libraries that developers rely on. The first stream focuses on removing any subjectivity from the build process by striving for full automation. An automated build pipeline can include additional automated security checks such as SAST and DAST to gain further assurance and flag security regressions earlier by failing the build, for example. Now, we are not recommending that everybody should start with failing the build. In fact, that is our guidance is pretty much against that. Once you tune out your SAST and DAST tools for false positives and your developers have very high level of confidence on your SAST and DAST tools, and you have high fidelity issues findings coming from SAST and DAST tools, then you can decide based on kind of pre-configurable options to fail a build if, for example, you find more than one critical or more than X number of high security issues. The second stream acknowledges the prevalence of software dependencies in the modern software applications. It aims to identify them and track their security status in order to contain the impact of their insecurity on otherwise rather secure application. In the most advanced form, it applies similar security checks to software dependencies as to the application itself. One of the other new introduction to SAM 2.0 is secure deployment. So let's look at that. This secure deployment security practice focuses on automatically securing deployments to the production environment and all required secrets, managing all required secrets. One of the final stages in delivering secure software is ensuring the security and integrity of developed applications are not compromised during their deployment. To this end, the practice's first stream focuses on removing manual error by automating the deployment process as much as possible and making its success contingent upon outcomes of integrated security verification checks. It also fosters separation of duties by making adequately trained non-developers responsible for deployment. The second stream goes beyond the mechanisms of deployment and focuses on protecting the privacy and integrity of sensitive data, such as passwords, tokens, and other secrets required for applications to operate in production environments. In its simplest form, suitable production secrets are moved from repositories, code repositories, and configuration files into adequately managed digital vaults. In the more advanced form, secrets are dynamically generated at deployment time, and routine processes detect and mitigate the presence of any unprotected secrets in the environment. Now, my goal is to arm you with the knowledge so that you can apply OWASP SAM literally starting tomorrow. So let's look at how to apply this model in your organization. Now, this is a typical approach for rolling out SAM 2.0 model, which includes implementing these phases in a continuous cyclic fashion. Prepare, assess, set the target, define the plan, implement, and roll out. Now, before we do that, we need to spend some time preparing. This phase is the most critical phase for the success of OWASP SAM application in your organization. And I have witnessed several organizations who skip this phase, which resulted in derailing their security efforts. It really consists of 4 activities in a nutshell. Defining the scope, which means identify if you would like to roll out OWASP SAM across the whole organization, across a particular business unit, or at an individual application or project level. Once you identify the scope, you need to identify the key stakeholders and get their buy-in. Because if you're trying to apply OWASP SAM across the whole organization, and if you just get the buy-in from just one business unit, one project, it's not going to work. So that's where you need to identify and really convince or get the buy-in of your stakeholders during this phase. Once you get stakeholder buy-in, you should start spreading the word and evangelize SAM activities, because everybody should know that what are SAM activities, they need to educate on them, and that kind of sets an example or expectation across the organization. What are some of the SAM activities that they need to bake into their plan for the next releases or next iterations? To measure current level of maturity, you need to start with an assessment by conducting interviews with the key stakeholders to evaluate current security practices. We recommend in-person interviews versus emails or Slack messages. This way, you can explain the key intent behind any activity and clarify any potential doubts. And at the same time, you build those partnerships across the organization. Now, there are 3 ways in which you could perform an assessment: a lightweight assessment, a detailed assessment, and a hybrid assessment. The lightweight assessment is simply interviewing key stakeholders and recording their response. During detailed assessment, you ask for evidence for performance and quality for each activity being performed. While in hybrid assessment, you ask for evidence on a need-to-know basis for some of the activities and not all of the activities. Each assessment style is suitable for different organizations at different phases or their different styles or cultures. I personally like hybrid assessments. And also, it also determines whether you are going to be doing this assessment, SAM assessment in-house, or you're going to use some external third-party application security consulting companies. If you are going to be doing the SAM assessment in-house, I would still use hybrid or lightweight assessment. But if you're engaging a third-party assessment party, they may prefer to use more detailed assessment. Also, I have seen that some organizations, they use lightweight assessment earlier. They perform detailed assessment earlier during the implementation phases. And as the time progresses, they switch to either hybrid or lightweight assessments because they already have the context of the organization during the first organization, and subsequent organizations, you just kind of build upon the first assessment. Thus, there is no need for doing detailed assessment every single time, which results in some, I would say, bandwidth preservation. As I mentioned, I personally like hybrid assessment. Now, once you record these responses, you can assign maturity levels using the SAM worksheet. And SAM worksheet is one of the many resources that we have made available. Now, let's look at how to calculate maturity scores. So finally, we came up with the new scoring model, which still primarily based on coverage. However, we also added quality criteria for each security question to add another dimension to the score. Now, our guidance to score 0 if quality criteria are not met. Now, going back to one of the SAM core principles of simplicity, we decided to add quality criteria for each question instead of creating like whole another assessment for quality. This way, the time to complete an assessment did not significantly increase for SAM 2.0 compared to its predecessors. Overall maturity score for the security practice is calculated by taking average of maturity level 1 between stream A and stream B, and adding that to level 2 and level 3 maturity. Once you finish an assessment, you need to define the target as per your organization's business drivers, risk profile, and the culture. This is one of the reasons we mentioned that SAM does not take a cookie cutter approach where same methodology you apply to each and every organization. It is very important to spend some time to understand your organization's business drivers, risk profile, and the culture during this exercise. Once you define this target, the most important step is to estimate the cost of implementation. Many SAM initiatives fail when folks forget to estimate and plan increased cost of implementation, resulting in lack of resources dedicated to security improvements that they plan for. Don't make that mistake. So now let's look at the cost of implementation. The cost of implementation would become direct input into defining a plan. During this step, you need to determine change schedule as per upcoming release and develop or update your roadmap plan over the next 4 or 5 phases. We recommend implementing SAM changes over minimum 3 to 5 and maximum 5 phases. So 3 to 5 phases is very standard. Each phase can span between 3 to 4 months up to 12 months. In order to focus on highest impact, you should start with high impact security improvements such as training and awareness and the threat assessment. Now, overall, if you want to make a really good progress, if you want to really take your organization to the next levels of maturity or as much higher level of maturity as possible, it takes a good amount of 2 to 3 years time frame. So be patient. Now, once the plan is defined, start implementation. Implement activities using SAM 2.0 guide. Leverage other OWASP projects. SAM aspires to be an umbrella project for all OWASP projects. That means each OWASP project can map back to one of the SAM business functions and security practices. Here I have provided some examples of OWASP projects and how they map back to various SAM business functions and activities. There are OWASP projects that can map to multiple SAM business functions such as OWASP Top 10 project and OWASP Mobile Top 10 project. Recently, we also have some of the community members donated the online assessment and online dashboard functionality for OWASP SAM. For that, more details, you should visit Concord USA website. They have provided the online assessment. And one of the community members, Satish, has provided online dashboard. If you need more help in that area, feel free to approach me at my Gmail, which I'll provide later on. After implementation, we need to create and update scorecards on regular interval by capturing scores from before and after an iteration of assurance program build out and communicate this progress to the senior management. I've used these scorecards to demonstrate and communicate security improvements to the highest level of management in the companies that I work for. This help management visualize the progress in overall security improvements, which results into even more support rolling out next phase of security improvements. There are some of the available resources we have to get you started using SAM 2.0. All these resources are linked to ovasam.org website. And as I mentioned, there this online calculator that Conquered USA has created that you could refer, and the dashboard, online dashboard that Satish, from one of the community members, also has donated to this project. So if you want more resources, you can visit those websites. Now, SAM also has provided now multiple types of toolkits. So earlier in the old days, SAM had only the Excel spreadsheet, Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Now the same SAM toolkit is also available in Google Docs as well. For those of you who are or who might be using SAM 1.5, as I mentioned, SAM 2.0 is not backward compatible. So we have also provided a mapping from SAM 2.0 to SAM 1.5. So this mapping is also available on our website. So if you forget all these resources, just remember one resource, which is the website ovasam.org. Now, one more thing before we conclude this talk. We recently introduced SAM Benchmark Initiative, which helps answer the question, how do I compare to other organizations? SAM Benchmark Initiative is inspired by BSIM. As I mentioned earlier during the talk, that BSIM is more of a descriptive nature, which tells you what other organizations are doing at each level of security maturity level. Versus SAM is more of a prescriptive model. However, one of the very useful aspect is always like, how do I compare to other organizations? And that is why SAM Benchmark Initiative was inspired by BSIM. The goal of this project is to collect the most comprehensive data set related to the organization's maturity of application or software security programs. And we have made this available, data collection available in two different forms. One is verified, and the second one is anonymized data collection. So verified data collection option is where you say, hey, I'm person XYZ from this company, and you are okay even letting everybody know that this is the company and this is the scorecard, SAM scorecard from that company. At the same time, we understand that we are in the very, very, very high privacy environment going into the future. So we have also made anonymized data collection available. That is where we do not distribute or we do not even disclose that this particular scorecard is coming from this particular application and it is submitted by this particular person. So it's completely anonymized data collection. What we care for is more about the data collection of which organization is doing what at which level versus knowing specifically, the name of the organization and things like that. So this is why we have to make this option available for folks who are more concerned about the privacy. As somebody said, proof of the pudding is it in eating it. So if you haven't yet, I invite you to please start using SAM 2.0 starting tomorrow. Hopefully, I'll come back next year to discuss the lessons learned. Would like to thank Honeycon organizers, volunteers, and sponsors for putting together a great Honeycon conference in Guadalajara, Spain. I'm really looking forward to visiting in person next year, and thanks to all of you for listening to this talk.